You are listening to Armchair Healthcare, a podcast on pills, placebos, and policy.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Armchair Healthcare.
Yeah, hi, everyone.
I'm Nat.
And I'm Max.
All right. So what's going on this week, Max?
Also, I think the big healthcare news was that Pfizer has decided to reel back some of their drug price increases thanks to both a tweet and a phone conversation with El Presidente, President Trump.
Well, they were called out, in particular from Trump, right?
Yes, they were called out in particular, and it's unclear what this means. Is this just like a little bone they're throwing him so that he shuts up and leaves them alone? Because in their statement that they issued, they said that these price increases will go into effect in 6 months unless Trump's drug price plan comes out.
So are they saying if the drug pricing plan comes out, they won't raise prices? Are they trying to get drug? I don't understand what their motive is here.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit unclear. As we mentioned in the previous podcast, drug pricing is all kind of messed up. And, Pfizer doesn't actually care that much about the actual list price of a drug because that's not what they get paid.
Well, they're the kings of there's not a drug pricing problem. There's a drug affordability problem, right?
Well, yeah, I believe the CEO, Ian Reid, has been one of the biggest defenders of pharma's pricing generally. But in their defense, they did say that their net realized price was flat over the year. And I think that Pfizer delaying the drug price increases doesn't affect them as much as it affects the PBMs. Because the PBMs are the guys who make the margin between the list price and then all those rebates. So having higher list prices actually helps the PBMs probably more than it does pharma. And so having them, take a break hurts PBMs a little more than pharma. What Pfizer did doesn't really necessarily hurt them economically that much.
Well, how many drugs were they gonna check the price on?
I don't remember the exact number, but it was maybe 8 or 10.
Yeah,
something like that. But then other drug companies also said they were going to halt pricing. So Gilead, I think Novartis.
This seems like a PR move to me.
It could very well be a
these
PR
guys. They had a call with Trump too. So they probably were like, okay, listen, I scratched your back a little bit. You look good on this. You scratch mine. It's sort of the pharma version of the North Korea summit. Let's just make this all look good for everyone. We'll say, we'll hold off on prices. We'll hold off on prices because El Presidente said so, and everyone looks good, right? That's kind of what I see here.
Yeah, and I think Pfizer really is probably really sensitive to any sort of call out by Trump or anyone else from the government on their prices, just because they've historically been screwed by the U.S. government. If you remember when they were trying to merge with Allergan. Yeah. So Obama came out with that rule related to tax inversions, which caused Pfizer to completely scrap the whole entire massive deal.
The loser in this situation mostly being AstraZeneca shareholders over the past few years. Because
no, I think it was the Allergan merger.
Oh, the Allergan merger, not the AstraZeneca one.
That got because Allergan's based in Ireland, I believe.
Yes, but AstraZeneca is based in the UK.
Yeah, but the UK doesn't have low taxes. Ireland
does.
No, but Ireland's where you
Ireland's
actually
got the best taxes. Ireland's 12%, something like that, and UK is 20. So
yeah, but if anyone's going to domicile in a UK possession, they usually go to Bermuda, something like that.
But that looks sketchy.
Well, yeah, I believe Tyco, one of the biggest frauds in U.S. financial history, they went to Bermuda.
So it's a red flag.
Yes, and speaking of frauds. In our first podcast, I had mentioned that my favorite fraud that's kind of ongoing is Mimedx, which, since then, the CEO and the COO have both resigned, and the interim CEO is now someone from a restructuring company. So for a company that has no debt, to have someone from a restructuring company become the CEO and get paid an hourly rate of $975 per hour
He gets paid an hourly rate?
Yes, he's getting paid an hourly rate.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I've never seen that ever. I mean, if it's an interim CEO, you can think of like maybe a weekly rate or a monthly rate, but an hourly rate. And then also any analyst or associate from this restructuring firm that also does work on Mimedx will be billed at between $400 and $600 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So
if
Mimedx
I
is
was
getting fleeced.
if I were these guys, I would just extract as much as I could before it all closes the doors.
Yeah, that's pretty much what's happening. I mean, they're probably going to be the big winners.
I mean, I wouldn't actually do that. I said I would do that, but I'm not crooked, so I wouldn't do that. Just to be clear, we joke around about starting frauds, but we're really not fraudsters. Promise.
It's really interesting that a company that they've been attacking shorts, claiming their innocence for so long, has so suddenly just not admitted to, but like it's very clear there's something very seriously wrong here, or they wouldn't have gone down this path.
Well, I don't understand the logic here of these guys in power. I guess you just get pushed and pushed and pushed. You can like fool people for a long time, right? And you just get more and more desperate to try and keep up the facade. But I mean, what's going through the heads of these guys, these people running these different schemes as the ship is sinking? Because they'll continue to be like, oh, everyone's out to get me. Everyone's out to get me. When they very well know that they are completely fraudulent. They could just sort of wind it down and be like, oh, okay, just be a little bit more believable. I don't know. Or just bail the hell out. What's it worth keeping the ship afloat for like a few more months?
I mean, there is some self-delusion involved. I've read some of the testimony from some of the Enron executives, and I think they really believed their own BS. And that plays a little part in it. And then, all the kind of shady stuff they're doing, they're probably thinking, well, this is just how businesses run. So, oh, sure, we're stuffing some channels, but that's normal. We're not doing anything outrageous. That could be, what they're thinking.
No, we're not hurting anyone. Just trying to make a buck.
Yeah, they're just white-collar criminals.
Well, I remember back when, who was it? It was Cyrus, which is the other amniotic membrane company, basically came out and was like, yeah, it's not working. The market isn't working for us at all. I remember when that happened, I was like, why the hell can these guys not manage to sell any? There's the same exact product, right? And then Mimedx has no problems whatsoever. And I guess we have the answer now.
Yeah, I mean, it will be very interesting when they actually come out with the results of their internal investigation. Because we'll probably find out that they're really not as profitable as they seem. Although, I mean, honestly, they don't have debt, so they don't have that huge red flag that does come up where they're showing profits, but like their debt's increasing, or they have like some huge accounts payable or something. It's not really there, but who knows?
Yeah, and then Valiant can buy them.
Oh yeah, that would be perfect.
Yeah, Valiant can buy them. They love to buy companies that are already in the middle of fraud. Stuffing channels.
Yes. Well, yeah, that's exactly what happened with Salix, right?
Yep.
And then Valiant's, it's just amazing. So, I mean, their stock has recovered nicely, but it's funny, they are divesting, they're lowering their debt, but if you actually look at kind of their debt to EBITDA ratio, it's not improving because they're selling their profitable businesses. So, their profit's going down, their debt's going down, but maybe at a slightly lower rate than their profits are going down. So I don't know how this really benefits them that much. I mean, they're not in imminent danger of bankruptcy, but that's about it.
Well, that's something. We'll see. I honestly don't know what the trajectory for Valiant's going to be at this point. I mean, how much stuff can they sell? And they're just playing the opposite game of just constantly jacking up their EBITDA to raise more debt. So I guess cuts both ways.
No, not really EBITDA. It's adjusted EBITDA, which is my favorite metric. And yes, I am being sarcastic. It's really a metric that should not exist in the universe. I mean, EBITDA itself isn't even a GAAP measure. It is something created by John Malone to sell his cable companies to Wall Street because they had like huge capital expenditures, so a lot of depreciation, etc. And so he created EBITDA. And now somehow we're valuing healthcare companies by EBITDA, and then they don't like EBITDA that much, so they make it adjusted EBITDA.
Now, why can't we just use cash flow? Cash flow is a real thing. Why do we have to use EBITDA?
Yeah, we can actually use free cash flow, which I think is probably the best measure to value these companies, rather than some made-up number like EBITDA. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, we have a lot of debt, so we're paying a ton of interest, but ignore that. Interest has never made a company go bankrupt.
But what was it that WeWork used? Was there a doubly adjusted
Double secret
Double
EBITDA?
secret EBITDA.
No, it was community adjusted EBITDA.
Community adjusted EBITDA. That's right.
So they took out staff costs.
They took out staff costs. See, the metrics look really good when you take out COGS and staffing and R&D. Once all those things are taken out of the earnings equation, it always looks good.
We are definitely at the sweaty armpit end of the cycle where all this stuff is happening, and it's just obviously not right. There is a company that is, I believe it's called Away. It's a luggage company.
Oh, yeah.
So it has a $375 million valuation. It's either
Really?
375 or 325. It's a private company.
It's just it's a piece of luggage with a battery in it. And I thought they already got in trouble for like blowing up on planes or potentially starting fires.
All they're doing is selling luggage that other companies are selling for $250 for $500.
It's all about marketing, man.
No, it's the exact same piece of luggage.
And I see ads for this thing all over the subway here. So that's what people respond to. They don't respond to actual quality anymore. It's just marketing. It's selling a lifestyle.
They raised $50 million in a Series C financing for luggage.
Well, it's better than the juice press thing.
The Juicero?
Juicero, that's the one.
I love the Juicero. Oh my gosh, it was so great. I mean, you don't even need it. You just cut open the bag and you pour it out yourself. And that, I believe they raised a couple $100 million.
It's bougie Capri Sun.
What would you call it?
Capri Sun? A bougie Capri Sun.
Okay.
All right. What else we got, Max?
Something that happened, I think within the last week, was the Biogen, another set of Biogen AZI Alzheimer's data.
Is amyloid back? Amyloid's back, baby.
They brought the sexy back to amyloid.
The sexy back to amyloid. Yeah, there you go. That's good.
Yeah, the data that they've released is
they
spotty.
haven't really released any data.
Yeah, they have like their own metric that they created, which takes items from like ADAS, COG, and MMSE, and all these other kinds of weird Alzheimer's metrics that they always use, and they jumbled it together into their own thing. I believe they tested maybe 4 doses. Only the highest dose seemed to work, but then we really don't have much information on, first of all, is the scale even validated? How much of an absolute difference was it?
Yeah, it's something that's never been used before. Like, eyesight made it up, right?
Yes, I love those scales, and the FDA really loves those scales.
Then there's also this nonsense involving the statistics. So this was originally designed as a Bayesian statistics trial, which is cool. I actually think that's pretty neat because it should allow you to sort of make adjustments as you go and sort of in the clinical trial design and the dosing and how many patients need to be on it and everything else. So you don't have to do everything like a big batch of patients and then see what the answer is afterwards. So I like that idea. But what's strange is that the trial failed on the basis of the Bayesian analysis, but succeeded on a traditional analysis. And what's strange about this is that, due to the reasons I just described, Bayesian statistics tend to be more forgiving. You always start off with a prior that you just pull out of your ass for Bayesian statistics. Then you adjust it basically however the hell you want throughout the course of the trial. So they met the endpoint at 18 months using traditional sort of p-value metrics, but not on the Bayesian.
I wonder how many different statistical methods they used to try to see if... I'm just wondering if they did some data mining and they're like, hey, look, the Wardy one actually works. And all these 50 other ones that we were thinking of, now, we don't need.
You bring up a good point, which is with the Bayesian stuff, because you're constantly adjusting on what you've done before, right? You can't really do subgroups in the same sort of way, right? Because what you're doing is you're always sort of like constantly moving the bar up and down as far as like where you think the success will be, like what the actual parameters that you're measuring are. And so that's my theory for why it failed on the Bayesian analysis, is because they had these earlier arms of the lower doses, which must have just done nothing. And so that sort of pulled down the estimates for how effective the drug was. And so when they went into the highest dose, it was already pushed in the direction of failure at that point. But that's just an estimate. That's just a guess because I have no real idea. And speaking of the dose, there's the other issue of what was the high dose in this?
Oh, yeah. The high dose was 10 mg per kg. 10
milligrams per kilogram for a monoclonal antibody given once every 2 weeks. So we're talking about, this is a lot of actual material. That's a pretty big dose.
Yeah, so for the average man, that would be about a gram.
Gram of antibody.
Yes.
Yes. I think all the antibodies in your body to begin with are measurable in grams to start off with. You might have, I don't know, 1 to 10 grams of antibody right now. So it's quite a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about like a vitamin C pill that people take every day, and it's a kind of a big pill, that's a gram.
Well, this isn't, you're not going to be eating this, of course, because it's an antibody. So you're going to be injecting this. So you have to get that gram of antibody dissolved in something and inject it into your arm. So it's going to be a big syringe.
Yeah, and then another issue is that the safety is a little bit unclear. Biogen went out of its way for their other Alzheimer's product. What is it? Aducanumab. They go out of their way to say that the area edema on the brain. Anyway, it's a side effects of some of these beta amyloid antibodies. The area that they see is limited, transient, etc. In this press release, they didn't say that. They said it was under 10 or 15%. They did not say if it was severe or not. But they did say that the injection site reactions or the infusion reactions weren't severe. So it just makes me think that when they present the full data, you're going to find out that in the one dose that it worked, it's probably not safe enough.
It causes edema.
Yes, in the brain.
Okay. We can live with Alzheimer's, if we're going to get edema in the brain from this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, previous antibodies have killed people because of this, for this reason. So it's a very serious reason.
Can I just complain about amyloids in general right now? Not all amyloids, just the amyloid hypothesis.
Yes, please.
Oh, God. I mean, when are we just going to let this one die? I mean, from the very beginning, did you know, Max, that there's no correlation between symptoms of Alzheimer's and amyloids?
No, I did not know that.
No, you can cut open somebody's head and you'll see some amyloids in there, and you'll see they'll have some Alzheimer's symptoms, but there doesn't seem to be any correlation between the two. Presence of amyloids is always there if you have Alzheimer's, but you can't, at least until very recently with the invention of some of these PET probes for amyloid plaques, there was no way to tell if somebody actually had Alzheimer's until you cut open their brain, right? Because the definition of Alzheimer's was having the plaques. Otherwise, they could have just had some other form of dementia with the exact same symptoms. And there's always been a theory out there that the reason why all these Alzheimer's trials always frickin' fail is because a lot of these people don't have any amyloids to begin with because they don't actually have Alzheimer's, quote unquote. They have some other form of dementia with the same symptoms. And so now we can actually test for these patients. We can actually see that they have amyloids from these PET probes. And still, none of this crap works.
Exactly. I remember the Lilly drug that failed 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, not too long ago.
They claimed that their original phase 3 had failed because 25% of the people in the trial actually didn't have plaques, and that in the new trial, they'll test everybody to make sure that they have Alzheimer's. Well, they still failed.
Yeah, there's actually a good chance, too, that you can live a normal life and never get diagnosed with Alzheimer's and have a few plaques, too. So I want to see some other avenues of research on this besides amyloids, just because they seem to be the easiest target. You know what I mean?
What about tau?
Tau's interesting. Tau's on the inside of cells, right? And actually causes sort of a misformation of some of the internal structure of the cells. That you could possibly say, okay, that might kill some neurons. How you get from A to B is still missing, but really it's not been looked at nearly as much. I mean, it's been looked up in basic research a lot, but not nearly as much in terms of drugging it. And there's other stuff too. There's the whole inflammatory hypothesis, which I kind of like too. I'm not sure that's ever been tested. What else you got, Max?
Rebecca Robbins from STAT actually came up with a great name for those pipeline charts for early stage companies where they really stretch out the preclinical portion so they look later stage than they are. Like they'll have a column for screening, lead optimization, etc. And they'll have like some of their arrows going like all the way across the page.
They're in IND enabling studies.
Yeah, and when they're in IND enabling studies. So
and then phases 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, and then it's just like clinical trials. And then marketing or something. So she's called them Hypelines. So I think that's completely an apt way to describe.
I mean, who do these guys think they're fooling? Because, I mean, if you look at enough pipeline charts like this, that you could potentially be fooled, or that you could actually look at this and interpret it and be like, oh, okay, there's a pipeline. This is what these things always look like. I feel like those people would also know what those terms meant and know that you're just trying to fool them. So it's going to be the real lazy investor that is focused on biotech, sees tons of these charts, but doesn't bother looking at the headings. Seems to be a small group, not really worth it.
What my guess is that there's a marketing consultant out there, or they had a marketing consultant who told them, yes, people will know that you're still preclinical, but it's about subconsciously they will think you're more advanced. So you should really, make your chart look like this. It's not. I don't think it's the management necessarily saying, oh, we need to fool investors. I bet it's like some marketing person that they have. Whenever
I see somebody put discovery on there, that's the one that makes me the craziest. It's one thing if you have a drug and you're like, okay, we got to do we got to put it in some rats, see if it hurts them when they're pregnant. At least we have an idea. We have a drug in hand. We have an idea of how it works. But when they put discovery on there, that means they have nothing. You don't fill up the bar underneath that, because that means I'm in the discovery phase for a whole bunch of different drugs right now. I'm trying to find drugs for hair loss. That's a big one for me.
Yeah, hair loss. I don't know. I mean, that's very it's hormone related, isn't it?
Yeah, it's because I'm so manly.
I don't know if you want to mess with that. I remember when people wanted to make that, Allergan came out with the eyelash lengthener.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember what it's called. It began with the letter L. At the analyst day where they were like featuring it, someone asked, could this be used for hair loss? And they're like, well, that's hormone related, but we're looking into it. This eyelash lengthener can change the color of the whites of your eyes permanently.
That's not good.
To a not healthy color. Needless to say, this product has been quite a dud. Anyway, that was an aside. I thought it was funny.
As another aside, I was in a talk one time, and this was at Rockefeller University, and they invited this person to come talk. And the person was talking about hair and hair stem cells. This professor found the stem cells for hair in the body, and this group of mostly male professors in the audience, there's a rumble throughout the crowd as they put it together that they could potentially get some hair stem cells injected into their bald scalps. It was pretty entertaining. It was very popular, and they're like, "Are you going to commercialize this?" And she's like, "I'm a professor. I'm not really interested in that, but yeah, I see why there's a lot of interest in the crowd."
People do some crazy stuff so they have hair. I mean, have you ever seen someone who's just had hair plugs?
No, I haven't in person, but I've seen pictures. There's a new company out there, which is the hair plug robot. I don't remember the name of the company.
What is a hair plug robot?
It's a robot that gives you earplugs. You load this sucker up with all wherever they get the plugs from. So you put in this robot, and the robot, because the problem with hair plugs is it looks like doll hair. For some reason, people can't help but put it in just perfectly spaced. So this robot uses an algorithm to make it look more like natural hair. And you also have to stick your head inside a robot that like peels off your scalp and puts hair in.
I mentioned the Hypeline chart, just to go back to that.
Oh yeah, we got a little sidetracked there.
Because there was a company called Rubius Therapeutics, which had one of these Hypeline charts, and they are going public with a $1.8 billion valuation. And their lead program is going to be at the IND stage early next year. And it's not for an indication that's a huge unmet medical need either. It's for PKU, which is currently served by Kuvan from Biogen. Biogen has another product, PegPal, going to service the same market. So you have this company, $1.8 billion. At most, this drug, maybe they'll do $200, $400 million. It's been a real slog for Biogen to create that market. And yet this company has a $1.8 billion valuation. It's complete insanity. They're doing PKU and refractory gout.
Refractory gout is people underestimate the gout market, mostly among like elderly Eastern European men who eat so much salami.
I remember Savians was really going after that refractory gout market. They ended up getting approval for a drug, and then they went bankrupt because there really isn't much of a refractory gout market. Most people do respond to, like, I believe it's allopurinol.
And it's not like it's going to kill you. I mean, I'm sure it sucks.
It's painful.
But it's not going to kill you.
Having like urea crystals, parts of your body, not fun.
It's not fun. You're right.
But, I'm sure this company's like looking to charge something like $200,000 a year for their treatment. So, yeah, there's, with a valuation like that, there must be some theory as to how they're going to be worth it.
I don't know. This seems these guys are putting enzymes or something like that into red blood cells. Back in my history as a young scientist, I worked on using red blood cells as a drug delivery device. But what we were doing was we were using it or investigating treatment of hematologic fevers. And what we did was we loaded them up with ribavirin, and we messed up the cells enough they would be recognized by macrophages and the like that, and then use it as a drug delivery device to get ribavirin in like really high concentrations into macrophages for people with Ebola. Pretty neat, right?
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
We did the same thing with platelets, too. You can actually deliver drugs using platelets to wound sites because they kind of just go there. They tend to concentrate at wound sites because that's what their job is. So you can load those guys up with drugs, too, and then deliver them there, too. Pretty neat, right?
Yeah, very cool.
I think it's neat.
One thing I do want to talk about is, so I saw an article recently that a major medical conference has decided to no longer have conferences in San Francisco because of too many complaints from the people who go. The name hasn't been disclosed, but it's probably something like an ACR, is my guess. So I just want to publicly ask the nice folks at JP Morgan to please move the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference out of San Francisco. It is not a good place to have a conference, especially one that is that big. It's a relatively small city. There's better convention space, hotel space, other places, and really the area around the conference is horrible. The homeless people have multiplied, become more aggressive. Not a fun place to be, that area. I mean, there are other parts of San Francisco that are wonderful, but this, no. Maybe we can do one in Orlando. Orlando would be fine.
You want the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference to move to Orlando?
Yeah, Orlando in January, that would be pleasant.
Oh, I see it.
Not July, but, Orlando, lots of hotels. They're cheap. They have a lot of convention space.
How about Hawaii?
That's a little expensive. That's a really long flight.
Yeah, but, somebody else is paying for it.
Let's say if you're a fund manager, I mean, you're going to have to lose probably 2 days on either end just traveling.
This is all very true. But Max, if they're going to hold it somewhere besides San Francisco, they're going to hold it in Boston.
Well, Boston would be great because it's right here.
And it's close to New York.
I mean, I could drive there. That would be really nice. I mean, I wouldn't. It's like a 6-hour drive, but like, you're in the comfort of your own car instead of on a flight. I hate flying. Older I get, the more I hate flying.
How about they just cancel the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference?
Well, why should they cancel it?
Because I don't want to go. Because that's why.
Because you don't want to go.
Because I don't want to go. It's not an enjoyable experience to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much speed dating, 4 walls, and the person in front of you. I don't know why they can't. They could just move it to New York.
But they don't hold conferences in New York. No one holds conferences in New York.
Yeah, they do. Like
Not
UBS
these big ones.
and all the investment conferences are in New York.
Well, yes, because investors are here, but they just hold them in like in a hotel. But with these big conferences, like big industry conferences, they don't really hold them in New York. That's what they should do. They should build a big conference center in New York so that I don't have to leave home as much.
That would be really nice.
It's good for the economy, right?
So yesterday I read an article about a diagnostic company that recently raised some money in a seed round. They are going to do a prostate cancer diagnostic based on seminal fluid.
If you think about it, Max, an objective and not childlike perspective, it makes a lot of sense considering that seminal fluid is partially provided by the prostate. In fact, I think the childishness of the medical establishment is probably the reason why we haven't looked at this yet. It's like if you have a blood problem, you look at blood.
It's true. But I think the reason it hasn't really caught on is because of more practical aspects. First of all, we already have a prostate cancer kind of diagnostic called the PSA, which is really easy, extremely cheap, and you don't have to have a 60, 70-year-old try to get some of their internal fluids into a cup at home.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Even if they get it to work, I don't see anybody actually using it, because in diagnostics, we're really moving towards easier diagnostic methods from kind of...
For better compliance.
Yeah, exactly, to improve compliance.
I mean, the other aspect here to keep in mind is the experts say to not even bother testing for prostate cancer, not even use a PSA test, because it doesn't impact mortality at all. So you can catch somebody with prostate cancer with a PSA test, and they're going to live for another 10 years and probably die of some other disease because they're already 85 years old.
The data go both ways on this one. Okay, in terms of healthcare spending, it probably makes sense not to test.
In terms of healthcare spending, you want people to die early and young.
I've seen data recently where I think the U.S. Preventative Task Force, I believe that's the U.S. PTF, they had changed their recommendations regarding the PSA test maybe in 2012. And so they made it a weaker recommendation. And so fewer people were out getting PSA tests. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, what happened was the people were getting treated later, and they were being initially diagnosed when they already had metastases. So in quite a few ways, it really hurt patients. So they recently changed it back to what it was, so things will be more normal. But you want to test people so that you're catching it early, because that's the whole point about cancer treatment. Like, it's curable if you catch it early. Going the opposite way of not testing. I remember in ASCO, maybe it was 3 years ago, I saw some data about aggressively treating early prostate cancer patients. And they had some phenomenal survival data. At least a few years worth of benefit if you give chemo early on. Mm-hmm. Because, right now the way people are treated for prostate cancer is first, they start with hormone treatment, and then they move to kind of the more serious stuff. And there'll be big gaps in spots in terms of the treatments, because, people with prostate cancer tend to live for years with it. This data was showing that, I believe it was docetaxel, which is on the milder side of chemo. If you give that, it's like years worth of benefit to these people.
Yeah.
Since we were talking about, making things affordable, the Vertex CEO recently wrote a letter to NHS because he's been having trouble getting his cystic fibrosis drug, Orkambi, approved. Mm-hmm. Or not approved, but reimbursed.
Reimbursed over there. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of patient groups, pro-reimbursement patient groups over there that are begging for it.
Well, of course they're going to want it.
And this is always the sick kids phenomenon. It's really hard to have a policy position that is in any way detrimental to sick kids. It's an uphill battle. Let me just say that much.
Well, no, NHS has been able to deny treatment for a lot of different medicines. I mean, they're probably one of the, I don't know, you could call them draconian, you can call them
utilitarian,
consistent, groups out there. And I think, because cystic fibrosis is relatively rare, I don't think the patient groups are that large. So they don't necessarily have that much power. Also, the UK, look, they need to live in a budget. What NHS is actually trying to do is have all the cystic fibrosis drugs have a set budget. From what Vertex is saying is, what that means is that if we come out with a new drug, we won't actually be getting any more money for it. Yeah. So that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me either, to be completely frank, as much as feel like it's incumbent upon them to, be prudent with their decisions and also try and provide benefit to people. You still have to incentivize these companies somehow. You got to give them a little bit more money somehow.
It's just their, quality of life year analysis showed that it was just the benefit is too expensive for them. It just doesn't meet their standards. And it's an expensive drug. I can't remember. It's definitely 6 figures per year per kid. And of course all the patient groups are clamoring for it because, they want something for nothing for everybody else to pay something. I mean, as we said last episode, that's kind of the whole problem with this healthcare system. You got like a few people lobbying, because they feel really strongly on a subject, and everyone else who, doesn't not necessarily hugely affected by it personally has to pay the bill, and all that adds up when you add up all these indications.
And personally, I would love for the government to pay for my hair restoration therapy, but I'm not a sick kid, so it's a lot harder for me to convince. I'm not sick at all. I'm not a kid, and it's totally elective.
So you believe in the free stuff method of government public policy?
Yeah, I want them to give me the free stuff and so have somebody else pay for it.
Anyway, I think that's it for me.
All right, that's it for me too.
Oh, so don't forget to subscribe to Armchair Healthcare.
All right, and talk to you next week. Our theme music is by Hazar.